All right. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today, I'm going to cover how to get started with ITOM Visibility. So whether you're a new customer that has just acquired ITOM Visibility, or if you're a customer that is just running some of the components but aren't sure what else you have access to, you'll learn all about that in this webinar. This webinar is part of the Live on ServiceNow program, which is a series of events that you can attend to connect you with ServiceNow experts. It is to help you more easily gain adoption with the products and features that you have invested in. Today we're covering ITOM, but certainly you can attend any of these sessions and you'll get to learn all about different ServiceNow products. The chat will have the link in there as well, or you can scan that QR code if you want to see what else we have to register for. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So everyone's line is muted. Please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions throughout the session. We have disabled chat, so please use Q&A. So please feel free to introduce yourself as well when you ask a question. So we'd love to know who you are and where you're from. We have a couple of polls today, so we ask that you please participate in those polls. We are recording this session and it will be shared on the ServiceNow community as well as on YouTube. And then finally, after the session ends, you will be prompted to fill out a survey. We always appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve these sessions for the future. So my name is Steve Emerson. I am an outbound product manager here at ServiceNow for ITOM Visibility and ITOM Governance. I've been here for around 5.5 years already, but I spent the bulk of my career in enterprise IT roles. So I know what it's like to be in your shoes. So as an outbound product manager, I wear a lot of different hats, but the one I love most is kind of connecting these sessions to tell you about all the greatness that we offer. And I also get to hear from you as to how you're using our products. And of course, we always welcome your feedback to help us improve the products in the future. With me today, we have a team of great folks behind the scenes who will be answering your questions, as well as helping out with some of the polls that we'll be launching and things like that. So thanks, John. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Bill. And thanks, Doug. So our agenda for today is pretty straightforward. I'm going to cover why ITOM Visibility is important. I'll give you an overview of all the features. I'll go pretty in depth on all of the 10 features that we have. We'll talk about things you can do for next steps to get started, as well as I have some slides about learning resources that you could take advantage of. So why ITOM Visibility? So visibility in and of itself is what we call the key to service operations excellence. And visibility is what helps you populate that single data store, right? The CMDB is your digital foundation for your organization, but it's also the digital foundation for ServiceNow. And a well-populated CMDB that is also service-aware helps you drive data-driven decisions across all the outcomes you see on the screen here. These, what you see here are typical functions that exist inside of an IT organization. Some of these are ServiceNow product names, of course they are. But when you think about the things that are happening in your org, you've got an IT operations department that where they would be able to take advantage and better prioritize their response to those operational issues and alerts based upon the impact that a resource has to your business. So if you get an alert on a specific CI, a specific computer, you'll be able to understand how that computer relates back to the business. Think about IT service management as well. Will help you better increase efficiency when you're planning a change, and also to reduce the risk. So when you plan a change and you put a CI or multiple CIs in that field, you'll be able to automatically see how the business is impacted. You'll be able to know who to notify in case there's going to be an upcoming planned service window, things like that. When you think about certificate management and firewall workflows, these are things that every organization has, but don't necessarily keep a good track of. And we'll talk about how we can help you improve that. When it comes to security, same thing as IT operations management. We can help you better prioritize your response to security incidents and vulnerabilities based upon the impact that the affected component has to your business. And then cloud, right? There's this challenge or this question about whether or not cloud resources or microservice resources belong in the CMDB. Today, you're going to learn why it is just as important to have those resources in there as it is to your on-premise and your virtualized resources. So I'm not going to go through everything here, but as you can see, this is just a subset of the things that a CMDB drives value for. And of course, why do CMDBs fail? Everyone would love to build a fantastic CMDB that they can rely on, right? But oftentimes, there's lots of issues that cause it to fail. I'm going to focus on the ones today in this webinar, the ones that I've highlighted in bold here. Number one being unreliable data sources or a lack of automation. If you're populating your CMDB manually, or if you have unreliable data sources that don't feed the CMDB correctly, perhaps that are not going through our IRE, right? That is going to cause lots of issues, right? Perhaps duplicates or stale information as soon as it's put in there if it's manual. It's not driven by the goals of your organization. So when you populate a CMDB, any data that you put in there has to be managed. But you have to ask yourself why you're putting data in the CMDB every time. So that is another challenge that we see. Organizations trying to boil the ocean by putting everything possible in the CMDB without understanding why or where the data is going to be used. Or too much or too little data, right? The critical few versus the trivial many. Don't put too much, don't put everything in there. Just put in there what you need, and vice versa. Don't put too little data, right? We'll talk about that as well. And then, of course, inaccurate data, right? Which is giving you the lack of trust, your customers that use the CMDB, that lack of trust in your configuration management process in which they stop using it. So automated population of the CMDB is critical to success. What we found is that improper population of the CMDB, it leads to that inaccurate and unreliable data, right? Duplicates, misclassified or unclassified or incomplete data, which results in the folks that are using it having to make poor decisions and do things over again, right? There was a study conducted by the Institute of Configuration Management that states that when people perform work from information that's not clear, concise, and accurate, they spend 40% of their time on corrective action or essentially going back and doing things again, right? So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So just a quick poll here. We'd like to know where you are in your CMDB journey. Are you just planning? Are you in the initial steps? Are you full speed ahead with your CMDB? Or maybe you want to know what's a CMDB. And I see some answers coming in right now. We'll give it 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's see what the results are. We see that the bulk of you are full speed ahead. That's great to hear. Some of you are in your initial steps. Some of you are just planning what you're going to do with the CMDB. And then at least one of you has said, what's a CMDB? That's interesting. We will talk about what that is in further detail today, as well as helping you to understand why it's important to use our products to populate that. So thank you. All right. Thank you for that. Now, let's get into the meat of this presentation today, which is giving you guys an overview of the features. The most important thing that you can do before you implement anything is to understand what you own and what you have, and how those features can help your business achieve better value. Now, the ITOM Visibility Suite includes at least these 10 features right here. And we will be iterating this over time as well as we release more and more features that help you populate the CMDB better. Now, I'm not going to go into details here because I have detailed slides for each of these features. But as you can see, it's tremendous value just across the board. Instead of just relying on the family releases to introduce new features to you, we use the store. So if you go to store.servicenow.com, you will find the majority of the applications I just showed you on that prior slide on the store, which means that you're able to actually install some of these applications on current releases as well as prior releases. For each application you go to here, you will be able to see what releases it's supported on. But just want to make sure that you are aware to go here all the time. Don't rely on just the family releases because you will be missing out. Our first feature is ServiceNow Discovery. I would assume the majority of you here are using ServiceNow Discovery, but if you're not, that's okay. Discovery is the feature that enables you to scan your entire estate to get and then discover your servers, your network devices, your storage devices, your cloud resources, anything that exists in your environment, and put those into the CMDB. We collect data about them, such as all the attributes, operating system version, what's the IP address is, right? All the basic things you would need in a CMDB CI. But also we collect running process data, TCP data, in order to build out those automated relationships so that you can get those automated dependency maps built. So this is the agentless version, and I'll talk about the agent-based version in just a few moments. So let's talk about automated dependency mapping. How does that work? So ServiceNow Discovery scans your network, and basically it finds devices with open ports, right, that are in the IP ranges that you define. So we're trying to understand who is listening on what port, right? And then we classify. We do some further interrogation to determine what is the device type. Are you a Windows server? Are you a Linux server, et cetera? Then we identify. We collect additional information about that CI, and we add that. We check the CMDB for an existing CI. If one exists, we update it. If it doesn't exist, we just create a new one. And then we explore it for further details to basically gather all the additional information and create the relationships. So on the left, you saw the process. On the right, you saw all the different things that are collected at each step. And in the middle, you see that we have that mesh, right? We can understand which components are talking to each other because of that automated dependency mapping. And here's what that looks like on ServiceNow. So we do host to component, which you see here, the Windows server, and all the components that are part of that Windows server. We see application to host. So we have this IIS server, we have the SQL server, right? And then we see application. We have this website to this IIS server. Our next feature of discovery is file-based discovery. So those of you that have use cases for software asset management, for example, that need to be able to detect the existence of software that is not necessarily listed in your package manager, whether it's Windows or Linux, we can do a file-based discovery to search certain folders. And as you can see in the middle, you can configure which folders you want to scan. Don't turn this on for everything because you're not going to like the results of the performance that on the hosts. But essentially, turn it on for specific files that you're searching for or folders. Those get added to the CMDB as a file information table, and then you'll be able to run a report and see what you have out there. A big use case for this last year was the Log4j. We were able to help customers detect the existence of Log4j in their environment through this file-based discovery. And you will all get a copy of this deck as well. It'll be uploaded to the community site for your use later on. As part of discovery, it's not a separate product by any means, but I want to call it out separately because cloud discovery is something that is it's a little bit different than regular discovery. What we do is we use an API to discover the cloud. What you see on the left-hand side are the 5 clouds that we support out of the box. So AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM Cloud, as well as Oracle Cloud. And we can discover IaaS or platform as a service or function or container as a service from those clouds. And we can put those resources into the CMDB, build the relationships and so forth. But it's important to understand why you want to do that. Well, your security team and as well as your software asset teams and your finance teams are going to want that data in the CMDB. because, and then also your SRE teams to, better manage health. All those cloud resources need to be, maintained from a health perspective, from a configuration governance perspective. We need to be able to control costs, software costs as well. And then also, of course, there's security incidents, there's vulnerabilities that happen against cloud resources. They're not immune to that, as well as regulatory compliance, PCI and PII. So a good example is if your security team would like to know what was the configuration of a particular application at a given point in time because it had PCI data on it, you can go back and produce a report for the security team that shows exactly what was on there. Now, when I talk about the two different types of discovery data, what cloud discovery does is the bottom. It gives you, and we do this across those 5 clouds, as I mentioned, we give you the resource with the, so for example, here we see the virtual machine instance and a bunch of different virtual machine instances. We see cloud management networks. We see the AWS data center. We see storage volumes. We see the availability zones and so forth. It's all of the cloud metadata that you would get from your cloud provider. And these are things that tags are associated with. On the deep dive discovery portion, this is the OS information. This is the typical thing you would do with a deep dive discovery that I talked about earlier. You would have to supply credentials that have access to these devices in order to query them to get their OS level information, start to build out the details of those systems. Those of you that are using cloud and you are bringing your own license, there's an option when you deploy software in AWS or Azure to say whether it's bring your own license, pay as you go, spot licenses. If you check that box, AWS and Azure basically say, okay, that's, we're not charging you for that, but you need to take care of it yourself. So there is a flag that gets set on the resources. We collect those flags and put them into the CMDB so that you can better manage the licenses for your own licenses, essentially, right? BYOL, pay as you go, and spot. When we talk about cloud discovery, let's talk about cloud native discovery, right? We've got the concept of Kubernetes. What is Kubernetes, right? It's something that is very agile, changes a lot, but customers are using it like crazy in their environments because it is easier. It's cloud native. It's easier to deploy and stand things up in a rapid manner, and it saves you from having to have specific virtual machines and physical machines, of course, things like that. We have 3 methods to discover Kubernetes. One is the agentless discovery with the Kubernetes patterns. We talked about agentless discovery already, but essentially what we do is we bring in the topology, the Kubernetes tags, as well as the software that's running in those containers. This here, we need bearer tokens or cloud credentials to set that up correctly. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes, you know that you have to go ask your teams for the bearer tokens. You also need some URLs for the clusters and things like that. So it's a little bit of a manual process to set this one up. And you got to set up a discovery schedule for each Kubernetes cluster. So this is really the best suited for those customers that are self-hosted Kubernetes on-premise or using cloud deployments, but you have access to the bearer tokens and to the credentials. With the automated, the second approach here is if you are running Azure, AWS, or GCP, they have managed Kubernetes services you can subscribe to, EKS, AKS, and GKE. ServiceNow will during cloud discovery, ServiceNow will automatically discover those clusters, and it will create serverless discovery schedules for each cluster. You need cloud credentials, right? And specifically for AWS, you need the assume role to make sure so that you don't need to gather additional credentials on top of that. So these are best suited for those managed Kubernetes deployments. And then finally, we have something called cloud operations, cloud native operations for visibility. This provides continuous Kubernetes topology tags, services, and software inside of the containers. All security access for this is handled outside of ServiceNow. And essentially, what you would do is you would give your Kubernetes admins a single line command to install a containerized MID and agent client collector in each Kubernetes cluster. And then we would essentially have continuous discovery there. So it's best suited for deployment by cloud native app teams, as well as you have the optional ability to monitor Kubernetes with our AIOps solution as well. And I mentioned on that previous slide about software discovery in containers. Something in the industry known as software decomposition is trying to understand what software is installed in your containerized environments. So we've partnered with Aquatrivy. It's an open source tool. We will be including Aquatrivy actually in a future discovery pattern, but today we download it separately. So Kubernetes, once we do discovery, we scan the container images with Aquatrivy to understand the software installations. So what you see over here on the right is this container image scan, this MySQL instance, and this MongoDB. Those are the applications that are created. And then down here, we can see on a specific Docker container, what software is installed on that container. So these helps with software asset management use cases, as well as the security use cases. When you deploy our ServiceNow Discovery, you want to make sure that you're constantly updating your patterns. Discovery and service mapping patterns and visibility content apps are what include the latest and greatest patterns. Whether it's new patterns, like you see here, this is some innovation we've done over the last year, or if it's updates to existing patterns. Now, we've included this visibility content app on the right that you see there. That is available from the store as well. That app is for updating patterns that were originally part only of the family releases. We've moved all that stuff over to this visibility content app so that you could update those on a regular basis. So for example, Windows patterns. If Microsoft releases a new version of Windows, in the past, we had to wait for a family release in order to release that. Now we have the ability to provide a pattern for that in this visibility content app because we're updating a host pattern. The host patterns were traditionally only kept in the family release. And with Cloud Discovery, we provide you with a UI called Cloud Operations Workspace. If you have upgraded to San Diego or later, you can enable something called the Next Experience, which is our new UI, and you could install Cloud Operations Workspace. Cloud Operations Workspace today is your one-stop shop for setting up Cloud Discovery, for viewing your cloud resources that you have, and also we also have the ability to view all of your Kubernetes resources. In the future, Cloud Operations Workspace will have additional applications on it as we scale out more and more cloud applications for your Cloud Center of Excellence. So we talked about agentless discovery, and then we also talked about cloud discovery. We provide another method of discovery that is agent-based. ServiceNow released an agent back in 2020 that you install to your Windows, Linux, or Mac OS computers that can push discovery information to ServiceNow. The agent is useful for scenarios where you have a gap, whether that be you can't get credentials from your teams, perhaps you have a domain controller, or a cloud environment that you just are not able to get those credentials from those teams. You could deploy Agent Client Collector and send that data back to ServiceNow. It's useful in DMZ environments. It's useful mostly, though, also on endpoints. So on your laptop, if you run an agent, whenever the laptop boots back up again, it can check in with ServiceNow and send its configuration back to ServiceNow. It's also useful beyond just push-based discovery, which you see here. Matter of fact, our original use case for Agent Client Collector was for monitoring. We provided a monitoring agent. And that monitoring agent can send metrics, logs, and events to ServiceNow for our AIOps solution to process. Agent Client Collector also has use cases for IT service management, as well as security operations, as well as software asset management. For ITSM, we provide you with the ability to look into a computer or a system to see what the current real-time system information is, so that you can so that the service desk can do some troubleshooting remotely. We have remediation playbooks for automating the running of certain actions to get a service to fix an application. And we also have virtual agent conversations. So if I have the agent on my laptop, I can chat with ServiceNow, and ServiceNow knows that the agent's on here. I can request something like access to a specific piece of software, right? Or I could ask for specific admin rights or something like that, and the ACC can grant that. For security operations, we provide security incident response, those analysts with additional enrichment from the hosts in real time, just by clicking a button to collect that extra data. And then for software asset management, our ACC for visibility natively collects installed software data as well as software usage data. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. So for those of you that use Microsoft SCCM for metering total usage time, we've introduced a capability that does the same thing for Windows. If you're moving from SCCM to Intune, you will notice that Microsoft no longer provides the software metering, which is the total usage time, right? So here we see that this piece of software has been used by, this many minutes, this many seconds. This is the usage count, and we give you the year and the month as well. Also, we have the ability to track last used date, which you don't see here, but so those two factors go into software asset management. And if you're running software asset management, you know that you can use that data to then to set up reclamation rules to automatically uninstall software that are not used, quote unquote. So you do need software asset management for that, just to be clear. Here is the Agent Client Collector for investigation I mentioned. And so by the way, our Polaris UI or our Next experience does support dark mode as well. I'm a big dark mode guy. I have it turned on my phone, my laptop, etc. So here's an example I took of my laptop where I could see the memory utilization, disk utilization, CPU uptime, as well as top processes by CPU and memory. I see the details about the CI up here as well. So if you're a service desk and somebody submits a ticket that their computer's running slowly, you could actually go into your service operations workspace, the investigation tab. If the computer has ACC, you'll see this type of data here. That type of data is something you're only able to get from, let's say, a remote control tool. Finally, we also support IPv6 discovery. So those of you that are maybe in federal organizations that have a memorandum to meet a compliance requirement to have all of your systems on IPv6 by a certain date, well, you just be rest assured that you can discover those with ServiceNow via agentless or agent-based discovery. So that was discovery. Our next feature is service mapping. Service mapping is the feature that lets you gain business context for your specific resources. So if you have a database that is installed on a host, and then that database, if you receive an alert for that host, let's say, or you're putting in a change for that server that the database sits on, you'll be able to see a view like this that says, all right, that host that Oracle database, that supports this order status service or this order logistics service. And then you'll eventually be able to tie that back to, I need to notify these people about the outage or about the upcoming maintenance window or get them involved in the approval process. So service mapping, we have 3 different approaches for you to map your services. If you're cloud-based or microservice-based like Kubernetes or containers, or if you have tagged your virtualized resources in VMware, you can use tag-based mapping to gain business context, like literally in minutes, for hundreds of services at the same time. And we have an application I'll talk about next called Tag Governance that helps you establish better tagging processes for your resources. So these tag-based service maps, essentially, we create them, very quickly, like I said. That's more for your for your cloud native, your cloud resources, your virtualized resources. Our second method that helps you build maps at scale is with this. It's new within the last few years, but it's called ML-based mapping. Uses machine learning to identify intelligent traffic-based connections that you may want to add to service maps. And it also has the ability to suggest services for you to map as a starting point. So you'll have a set of connections already established as part of that service, and you'll have a service map already built with the click of a button. And then finally, top down. Those of you that have been around ServiceNow a long time have heard about the top down method, where you point ServiceNow at an entry point, and then it has to go through that process to build it out, which I'll talk about actually on my next slide. So 3 methods, 2 of which are very fast, the tag-based and the ML-based. The last one, the top down there, is that's really for your mission critical services, where you want to make sure that you have every single possible resource aligned. Let's talk about the top down mapping process. First thing you do is you point ServiceNow at an entry point, say my billing app. And you give it the URL or any kind of connection parameters. Second thing that happens is host detection. So what you do is it runs the required steps of the discovery process, because service mapping relies on ServiceNow discovery, to gather all the details for mapping. Next part is CI identification, which is where we identify the applications that are running on the discovered host and the information from based on the information from that entry point. And then we discover the additional details, and we look for configured relations, typically in configuration files, to determine what's the next host that I need to create a connection to. Oftentimes you have to build these things out yourself, those connection points, which is why this method takes much longer than the other 2 methods I talked about. You could use ML-based mapping to enrich a top-down map. It's essentially a top-down map anyway, to add additional connections to the map that maybe you didn't gather from meeting with your architecture teams or meeting with your application teams. Those are just examples of services over there on the right. The tag-based mapping, ServiceNow Discovery natively discovers tags from clouds or from VMware or from Nutanix, et cetera. Anything that's tagged, we discover the tags, which are the keys and the values. We put those into the CMDB key value table. Next, what you'll do is you'll create the CI tag categories, which are essentially tags that equal the same thing. So a lot of times you'll see application or APPL or app, but really they all relate back to one thing, which is app. So you're essentially normalizing tags to one area. So maybe you've done that for app and environment, those 2 tags. Next, what you do is you create tag-based service families, so that you'll select which of those categories you just created that want to be included in a map. So oftentimes we see customers doing app and environment. So you'll get basically, application in prod, application in dev, right? So, such as train operations prod, train operations dev, and down the line. This is where you can easily map. If you have things tagged in your environments, you can easily map hundreds to thousands of services in minutes. You would then select which candidates you want to create service maps from. And then once you've done that, you'll operationalize them by setting them to the status of operational. and start using those in your daily work. Next, we have ML-based service mapping, which we can discover. It leverages two capabilities that are underneath the covers. One is a feature from Discovery. It is called application fingerprinting, which clusters like processes together. So oftentimes your applications may be built with wrappers, Java wrappers, PowerShell wrappers, .NET, and so forth. But how do you distinguish the actual application that's sitting in that wrapper from each other? Well, that's where the command line parameters come in, and there's other parameters underneath there that will help you, that will help us group like things into groups or to clusters. That's the application fingerprinting. Then the ML uses AFPs as part of its ML. Let's call it ML analysis. We look at CMDB TCP table and the CMDB running process table, and we factor in what suggestions would be meaningful for you to add to your service maps or to create complete services from. Fast forward here, our evolution for ML-based mapping is, we started in 2021 with Quebec. And as you can see here, we have iterated out through Tokyo. In Rome, we introduced the Service Mapping Plus application, which is where all service mapping innovations will now be going forward. So if you have service mapping and you want to use the latest and greatest technologies, install the Service Mapping Plus application to continue getting all the latest updates. Now in Tokyo, we also introduced something, or in the Tokyo timeframe, we introduced something called automated service suggestions, where you can map your services in mere minutes. So we have that cluster data, right? That running process data, that TCP traffic data. We do the ML clustering. We suggest services, what you see there on the left of the screen. Those are application service candidates. With the click of a button, you can click on Create Application Service, fill in a couple of values, and then you can have a service mapped in minutes. We have webinars on all these topics that I'm talking about today. And later on, I'll show you where you can point to for those resources. Our next feature is certificate inventory and management, which our goal is to help prevent outages from expired certificates for you. I was once a person that had to manage certificates out in a corporate environment, and I would do that via spreadsheets that for certificates that people told me about, or maybe ones that I submitted orders for myself. But inevitably, I always missed things because no one told me about it, or for whatever reason we didn't have it. What happens is, if you're not keeping track of your expiration dates and you don't renew the certificate, it can expire, cause an outage, cause maybe a cost impact or possible security breach. So what we can do with this solution is discover all of your certificates across your entire estate via three methods. One is port-based. So during your regular discovery scans, we can scan for common ports. You can add additional ports to scan for, so that we can discover all those certs that exist in your environment. And with port-based, we also create a relationship from the certificate to the host, so you know where it's installed. The next option is CA-based. And with CA-based, we support DigiCert, Entrust, GoDaddy, Sectigo, and Microsoft. We can discover the certificates from those CAs, put them into the CMDB. But what you won't get with that is you will not get where it's installed. Only with the port-based, you get where it's installed. Up next is URL-based discovery. Basically, point ServiceNow at a URL. We see this being used in DMZ environments, essentially that you will not be able to scan with a port-based. So I can point ServiceNow at even any public URL, discover their cert, and compare it up to the details from the security lock in your browser to see, in fact, yes, it does match. That's exactly what I was looking for. So all the certs get populated into the CMDB with installed locations. And again, installed means the port-based option. And then we help you, if you have service mapping, you'll be able to gain business context through automated relationship creation. We also then, that's the inventory part. The management part is basically being able to, we create automated task records 60 days prior to renewal. And we also create incidents or alerts for event management for already expired certificates. So there's a seamless integration with IT service management there. We provide you with a standard catalog for requesting certificates. We provide a manual method and an automated method. This slide shows the automated method. So you can request a new or a renew or a revoke. We can automate the request out to your CA. For automation, we support DigiCert, Entrust, and Microsoft. So a subset of the ones I told you about earlier. We have a roadmap to add more over time. And then at the same time, we create a change request so that you could track that process with your change process. And then, of course, we give you a dashboard to visualize the inventory, the trends, and complete lifecycle of your TLS certificate data. And here's just some screenshots here. We see some dashboards of the inventory, of the automation tab, of the request form, and of the automated relationships you can see that are created. So here I have a unique certificate running on an HA proxy. That HA proxy load balancer is part of this mapped application service called locomotive maintenance. And then it's part of this business application called railway operations. Our next feature is firewall auditing and reporting. If you have Palo Alto Firewall Manager, we can discover not only your firewall devices but we could also discover your firewall security policies, your firewall groups, and all the different things that are part of the firewall structure, put it into the CMDB. But then we can also help you manage firewall requests through a standard process. The biggest benefit here is actually auditing of the security policies. If you don't attest to your security policies on a regular basis, they can become stale. You could possibly have security breaches and so forth. So you want to make sure that you're doing that on a consistent basis. And then, of course, a dashboard to see everything that exists in your environment. And we also automate change requests as part of the firewall request process. Now, we don't automatically provision firewall rules, but we do make it easier for you to request them. So when I used to do this process, I would submit a Word document to the firewall team via email. Not the best way to track that. Here's just some screenshots here. You can see the firewall dashboard that shows you your audit tasks and your open requests for new rules. This one over here on the right is all of the firewall devices that you have. Here's the firewall rule request. And of course, here is a firewall auditing request. Any reports that you see here can be tweaked to what you need. Any catalog items can also be tweaked. Our next feature is tag governance. This allows you to set tag standards in your organization. Oftentimes we see most organizations have lots of tagging going on, but there's really no standards. So as you can see down there, you've got some keys that are common that we like to see out there. We can put them there with tag governance. So what we do is we discover the tags, which is the key values, right? We put those tags into the CMDB, in the key value table. That's discovery. That happens automatically, even if you don't have this app. With tag governance, you can set up tag auditing policies to help you verify compliance with those policies. And you can auto remediate tags with workflows, which is essentially adding tags, those keys and values, to your resources. And that happens in the CMDB automatically. And of course, if you have your tags, then those tags can be used to create tag-based service maps. Now, if you have an entitlement to ITOM governance, you can also update tags actually in AWS and Azure. Here's some screenshots here. We see the tag governance dashboards. You can see exactly what your health is. The tag governance efficacy dashboard helps you understand where you want to be versus your current stance. Down below, it's kind of blurry there. Sorry about that. That is a tag policy where you set up an auditing policy. You can do that against a specific service account, a specific set of CI classes, data centers, etc. On the right, on the bottom, you see a tag remediation, as well as what I've done is there is clicked a tag remediation preview, which would show you what would happen if I ran this tag remediation. Customers that are using Oracle are now able to, so ServiceNow is now a verified Oracle third-party vendor for database, middleware, and database options. So if Oracle comes to you and asks you to run the LMS scripts, if you're audited by them, what this app does, it's a discovery application that includes a bunch of patterns that are verified by Oracle. We can discover all of the Oracle data that they would necessarily ask you for in those LMS scripts. And we would enable you then to export that data very easily. So this saves countless hours, 6 to 8 weeks. We've seen customers that are being asked to run these scripts. We can do that in just a matter of minutes. So here is what that looks like. We have a dashboard here for you to easily download the data once you've collected it. So the glass data, right? The vCenter hardware information, as well as the virtual machine information, because you have to factor in the cores and CPUs and such. Here's some dashboards that we provide, and here is a link here that you can verify for yourself that we are in fact a verified vendor. These are the 6 tables that we put the data in the CMDB. You don't need software asset management for this because this is just for collecting the audit data. If you had software asset management, you can understand your license position at any given point in time. But this application here is really for you to collect the data needed for an Oracle audit. So once again, just more value with ITOM Visibility. Our next feature are Service Graph connectors. These are third-party CMDB integrations that you can install from our ServiceNow store. And I'll show you the slide next that has all of the integrations on it. But instead of writing your own integration that may or may not go through the proper processes, what we suggest that you do is go to store.servicenow.com, click on integrations in the tab up here, click on Service Graph Connector, and you'll see, I think there's over 30, if not more, that you can install in your environment and connect to those systems to ingest data. Now, later on, I'll tell you about when to use Service Graph versus Discovery and so forth. But lots of innovation. We continue to work with third-party vendors to build new Service Graph connectors. Sometimes we build it, sometimes they build it. Just note that they are certified and verified by ServiceNow. Our next feature is Cloud Native Operations for visibility. I talked about this feature earlier. I'm not going to go much more in depth, but to say that this is just another option. This is another app you can install. It's called Cloud Native Operations that has a visibility component. It deploys the agent client collector. It deploys a containerized mid server, and it will give you that continuous Kubernetes discovery. And then if you have ITOM Health, you can then manage the health of your Kubernetes environment on a continuous basis. Here's how that process works. Here's the mid and the ACC deployed as a stateful set. We have continuous streaming of events from configuration events as well as operational events. And then we do that through an ACC check. We send that data back to ServiceNow. At the same time, we also set up those automated serverless discovery schedules so that you could discover the clusters on a, get a baseline and do that maybe once a week or maybe once a day. But this is what gives you the continuous discovery here. And you can do that on any of these platforms. The final feature that comes with ServiceNow ITOM Visibility is called multi-source CMDB. This enables you, it's actually a plugin that you'll have to enable. I'm sorry, a property that you have to enable that allows you to do what I'm going to say here. So traditionally with our IRE, we would just if it was you configure it just to pull in one golden source for a discovery source of an attribute or a host. And we would not ingest the rest of the data. We just kind of leave it out. With the multi-source CMDB, we ingest all the data, but we only store the golden attribute in the CMDB. This allows you to go back and look at multi-source data at any given point in time with the CMDB 360 dashboard to then see, maybe I want to make a different source, maybe Tanium or Jamf as the golden source for a specific attribute, and you can change it on the fly and change it back again if you don't like it. With that said, as a result of what you've just seen here so far, which of the ITOM visibility features would you like to implement next? And thanks, John, for launching the poll. We have discovery, agent client collector for visibility, service mapping, certificate inventory and management, firewall audits and reporting, data collection for Oracle Global Licensing and Advisory Services, service graph connectors, cloud native operations for visibility, and finally, multi-source CMDB. Thank you guys for taking the poll here. Let's leave it open for another 20 seconds or so, John. And what I'm going to move on to next, while that poll is open, let's keep that poll open. We'll talk about next steps that you can do to be successful. I have a call to action for you here. One, I want you to convey the importance of having full visibility into your IT resources across your organization. Next, we want you to use all the learning resources that are available to understand when to use each of these features. And then finally, we want you to follow the 5 steps for successfully deploying a healthy CMDB. So thanks, John, let's go ahead and share the results. Okay, so it's already being shared, sorry. So from what I see here, the majority of you are next going to try out service mapping, certificate management, agent client collector for visibility, and tag governance. Thank you for that. I'll go ahead and end the poll. And of course, always seek to engage a services partner if you want faster time to value. These are very complex applications to install because you need to factor in 3 things: people, process, and technology. The technology, pretty straightforward. We can discover your environment. We can put in the CMDB. But how to use each of these features and also the policy and process behind each one, that is where a services partner really helps you gain that fastest time to value. So I want you guys to go ahead and follow these 5 steps, and I'm going to focus on 2 of these in today's webinar. Set your direction. This is where you're making sure that your CMDB, that any data you put in the CMDB aligns with organization, business goals and IT goals. Build a team and governance model, which is where you're essentially building out that configuration management team to standardize the processes and kind of manage that data going forward. Design your data model, which is really how are you going to align with the CSDM, Common Service Data Model. You want to operationalize the CMDB. This is where you populate it. This is where you make the data come to life. And then, of course, you want to create ongoing strategic alignment, making sure that folks that are using the data have alignment, right? So also having your leadership kind of set their direction, incorporating configuration management into your projects to make sure that people think about the CMDB. So if somebody goes out and says that they want to discover the Kubernetes environment, well, guess what? You have a solution that you could tell them about, right? So make sure that they're aware of all these features. So I'm going to focus on setting your direction and operationalizing the CMDB. So before you put anything in the CMDB, right, before you turn on your discovery or service mapping or whatever, make sure that your data aligns with business or IT objectives. Make sure that you understand what someone's trying to accomplish, how or what is the approach or constraints and and assumptions of putting that data in there, and of course why. What business outcomes will your CMDB or the data you're putting in there support? Then, of course, you have to measure this on a regular basis to know if you're on track, right? But the key point there is making sure that that it aligns with the business. And how, if we map this back, how do strategic initiatives map back to the CMDB? Now, this slide's a little bit older from COVID, right? So, but it's still, we can put in anything here and it'll make sense. So one strategic initiative might be, to enable the employees to work from home seamlessly. So some of the use cases with that might be, do my employees have the VPN client on their laptop? Is the hardware and software up to date for my VPN? What about, when troubleshooting VPN outages, how can I quickly determine the root cause? So what you need to put in the CMDB is an accurate count of current inventory, of hardware and software from end user devices across your entire estate, right? So that could be done with ACC or perhaps a Service Graph connector. Also, but how the infrastructure and application components support each other in the business from your VPN. So that's just one example there. The second example talks about ensuring citizens are able to file for unemployment when needed most. But essentially they're getting into PII data and so forth and keeping track of all that. So when to use each method? You want to make sure that you, of course, do automated population. So what we recommend is starting with discovery or agentless based, right? So our ITOM visibility applications you see on the right are designed with configuration management in mind. Service Graph connectors can be used to enrich your CMDB or fill in any gaps that you have, perhaps, that you cannot discover. I say that because most third-party tools are not designed with configuration management in mind. So you may connect to a Service Graph connector to pull in additional enrichment data into your CMDB, but some of these Service Graph connectors may not have everything you want in a CI. So you've got to determine what the use cases are, where to get the data from best. So think about that, but make sure that you always automatically populate. I'm going to share a few learning resources with you now, and then we'll wrap up. So thanks to all the, thanks to you guys for your questions. I see that our team has been answering them feverishly behind the scenes. First thing we have these technology workflow workshops. These are practitioner workshops where you can attend. We have lots and lots of ITOM visibility ones scheduled throughout the year. So John, if you can please put that in the chat, put that link, and you guys can sign up for new ITOM visibility workshops across, that's close to a city near you. Next, we have our ITOM visibility resource library, which is a single one-stop shop blog for helpful links, whether it's how-to blogs, videos, webinars, process guides, presentations, troubleshooting links, etc. That link is in there. And then finally, John and I conduct this ITOM visibility and governance community webinar series, where you can register for future webinars and view on-demand webinars. These are conducted on the third Tuesday of every month as best as we can hold that schedule. And then, of course, this slide here, and again, you'll get a copy of this deck. Content, this is all different types of resources that you have available to you to learn more about ServiceNow solutions in general. So we're out of time for live questions, unless we have one here that we feel. Oh, I see one that was marked. So in what way does service mapping and discovery align with the CSDM? It aligns, I didn't have a slide in there for it, but our technologies natively follow the CSDM to populate the CMDB. Discovery at the bottom will give you your technology layer, your hosts, your applications, and the relationships between them. The service mapping is the application service, which, if you're familiar with the CSDM, it sits right in the center of the CSDM. It is perhaps the most important element of the CSDM. So you want to make sure you automate your service maps and not build those out manually so that they're always up to date. And when you go to build out your business applications, your capabilities, you can rely on the data because you know that it is current, it is from your existing, it's near real time. And then finally, we'd like you to join us on our next webinar on March 21st, where we're going to cover how to extend Agent Client Collector capabilities. And we'll have John, Severin, and Richard to host that one. Thank you all for watching and have a great rest of your day.